What is up, everybody? Welcome back to a new video, and today I'm very excited to do kind of a first look and an impressions video of Junkie XL Brass. To be fair, I've had a little bit of time with this library now, and I've pulled in some of my favorite articulations, and I'll be actually showing you a little mock-up of Jon Williams's Olympic fanfare, just a little excerpt in each of these instrument sections. But before we do that, let me just get into the overview of the library, and you can see here that we have the library loaded up, and then when you go into the actual description, you can see here the different instruments that are laid out. So we have the full brass, which is basically great as a sketching tool if you're just looking for a wall of brass, and if you're looking to kind of sketch out some ideas with some long notes, some sustains, and some short notes. They actually give you 3 articulations to go with it. So you have your sustains, marcato short, which is like your middle short, and then staccatissimo is of course the very, very short example. And then for the rest of the sections, these are all the traditional symphonic brass sections, with the exception of the cimbassi. Cimbassi is more of like a film scoring instrument, but it's nice that is included here as well, given that it's a film scoring library. So yeah, it's quite a comprehensive list because we get the solo instruments of each section plus selected ensemble sizes. So solo trumpet, solo horn, solo trombone, solo yeah, that's it, and solo tuba. And then you get the section sizes of 3 and 6 for the trumpets, 4, 6, and 12 for the French horns. 12 is a kind of a classic now in a lot of brass libraries. 3, 6, and 12 again for trombones. I don't think we've really seen 12 trombones though very much in libraries. And then a solo tuba. And I think if they wanted to really go over the edge, they could have done something like ADO, where they have like, I don't know how many tubas it was, like 80 something or 60 something, something absolutely crazy. But this is a more practical scoring tool, so it makes sense that they just stuck with 1 tuba there. And let's take a look at the articulations for a second. So in each of the instrument sections, I'm just going to pull up random ensemble sizes here of each section, and you can see that they're all very, very consistent. So the these instruments all have the same articulations essentially. So we have sustains, sustains soft, which basically means the attack into the note is a little bit quieter. Sforzano sustains is kind of the opposite, where you almost accent the beginning of the note, so you get this accented sound. Marcatos are obviously the kind of stressed notes that don't last too long, so they have a long version and a shorter version, so it's like a tenuto. Staccato is of course short. Staccatissimo is even shorter, very, very short. And then we also have the rips as a bonus effect, which is cool. I just noticed here that in the A12 trombones, I actually don't see the rips anywhere, so maybe that is just not recorded for trombones A12, right? All right, and yeah, so the articulation set is relatively consistent here. So let's start with the full brass. Again, we only have 3 articulations, and you can see here actually about the mic positions. I've only downloaded the Alan Meyerson Junkie XL Close and the Tree, because I actually don't think it's very necessary to have an entire selection of mic positions if you're doing general film scoring work. It's just really, for most people, not that necessary. So I think that like one of the download presets, I think it's called the basic kit, and it comes with these 2 mic positions, the processed ones. So the processed versions immediately give you that classic film scoring sound. And this whole library is pretty cool because of the dynamic range recorded within it. So our orchestral tools basically recorded 5 dynamic layers, and we're going to hear that in a second. But yeah, the fades between the layers are quite smooth. So let's start with the full brass. As you can see, we've loaded up the sustains, and I'm just going to play through a little bit. I'm not going to talk too much. I'm just going to let the library speak for itself. Okay, here we go. So that's basically the articulations for the full brass. And you'll notice actually for the Mercado short, I was actually playing with a mod wheel a little bit. So the Mercados, in terms of the dynamic and the timbre, are influenced by CC1. So if you have the mod wheel at the bottom, you result in a very nice and mellow sound, whereas it's a little more brassy and upfront when you put the mod wheel near the top. Okay, moving on to the solo trumpet. I've loaded in basically all the articulations so we can hear what they sound like. So let's go to the solo trumpet and go through these articulations. So there at the very end, I was actually at the very top of the mod wheel. So you get the very searing, soaring top end, which is beautiful. Let's continue on. So personally, I find the trumpets very clear and very easily cutting through the mix. If you have a dense mix with lots of instruments, especially the higher dynamic layers can really provide a cutting edge that lets the instruments pop out a little bit more. In terms of the actual crossfades, it's relatively smooth. I don't really see any crossfading issues. One thing you might run into though is because you have so much access to these dynamic layers, it's actually quite easy to ride into the top of the layers quickly. So especially when you get to legato, for example, and you're trying to write these smooth melodic lines, you might want to use the option of turning off some of the layers so that when you ride the mod wheel to the very top, you don't accidentally access these triple fortissimo sustains. So then overall you get a more balanced performance, especially if you're writing kind of a line that's more mellow and smooth. So this is a super, super cool feature. And especially the legato, you can actually influence the volume of the legato transitions. So that's obviously a great option if you're playing something quiet and you don't want the legato transitions to really pop out. You can just turn those down. Here you can kind of influence the different speed zones. So like if you want playable runs and switch that around here, you want playable runs here when you're playing slower and then slower legato when you're playing faster, you have that option to do that. Okay. In terms of the mixer, it's relatively straightforward. You have basically these arrows here. So if I click the full brass, for example, open that up, these show the mics that are being activated at the moment. At first, I thought if you clicked on the actual mic name, that would actually turn it on or off. But then I realized you actually have the on and off buttons at the top. So I think for an update, it would be really cool if we had these clickable as well to turn them on and off, which would be nice. So just keep in mind when you have them, if you have one off, you're saving your CPU a little bit because you're not loading in those samples for this microphone position, but if you turn them on, then you can basically create a nice balance and blend, and then you can merge the mics together to get a nice custom mix of the mic positions, which is nice. Let me go through a little bit faster now. So I'll just go through, show you these different articulations, and then we'll move on to the horns. Same thing, start with the solo horn with all the articulations, and then horns A4, A6, A12, and then trombone and so on. And hopefully you like the tone as much as I do. Here we go. So there's all the trombones and trumpets. And yeah, the dynamic range is quite large. So if you find yourself having to turn up and down the volume on your output monitors, then I don't blame you at all. But again, it just proves the amount of the work that went into this library, just the range. So that's basically the trumpets. And actually, let's hear a couple of the staccatos and staccatissimo. Sorry about that. Okay, let's move to the solo horn. So let's start with the legato. This is very, very smooth here. So yeah, in terms of the horn itself, lots of dynamic range again. A lot of these are controlled by mod wheels, so all the way up until the staccato, really, like the stains, any of the long articulations are all controlled by mod wheel. Staccato, staccatissimo are controlled by velocity. So the harder you press, the louder the sample is going to be. And the rips are recorded at 1 volume, so the mod wheel doesn't really affect anything there. Okay, so far the CPU load has been pretty light, especially since I have all the RAM loaded in here. So my computer is set up with 64 gigabytes of RAM. Logic doesn't seem to be having any problems, and the recent sign update made the performance quite a bit better. So this is a great starting point. Let's keep going with the Horns A4. So that's the top of the mod wheel right there. Okay, let's move on to the Horns A6. Here we go. And I was hitting the top of the mod wheel there and then kind of tapering it off a little bit at the end. Okay. Very nice sound. For that one, I probably would have turned down the transition volume a little bit more. Then we have Horns A12. All right, here we go. Let's hear a couple of the short articulations here. We have staccato, staccatissimo, so very, very beefy, and you really hear the Taldex Hall ringing out there in the background, which is great. Solo trombone, here we go. And I love that it wavers just a little bit. It really adds that human touch of, you know, the airstream not being 100% consistent, which is, I think, actually really cool, especially in an exposed context. By the way, I honestly feel you can show all of these soloists in each of the sections as a featured instrument player. Like they're that consistent, and they crossfade very, very well in terms of the volumes, the dynamic ranges, and the layers. So very, very cool. Some shorts. So again, on that very like loud staccatissimo on the very bottom, you really hear the intensity of the blow in there. So very nice. Now, and especially in a full orchestral mix here, you'll notice that the rip kind of starts from an indefinite pitch from below, and then it rips up to the main note. So as an effect, it works very, very well, I think. All right, moving on to trombones A3. Here, let's hear some of the legato here. So for trombones especially, this is kind of a tricky subject, but generally, you don't want to really activate the fortissimo or triple fortissimo layers all too much. Unless you're doing some kind of trailer music and you really want that processed biting sound. Trombones are really, really good at cutting through a mix, especially on their higher ranges. So I would definitely save those moments of extreme bite, and they have a lot of high frequencies there in the buzzing sound, so save those for elements or for moments of really high tension, and especially the staccatissimo. So I tend to use a lot of staccatissimo or marcato or shorter articulations with the trombones when I'm writing music. The trombones are not the most agile legato wise. Horns and trumpets tend to be a little easier when they're playing legato. But trombones, they have to move their slide around. So it's a little, more difficult. They have to move and it takes a little bit more time. But with short articulations, I tend to use them quite a lot. So I think these trombones are definitely captured very well. And the sound quality, as we know, is very orchestral tools, very solid. Some staccatissimo. All right, trombones A6. Oh, yes, I've only pulled up the marcato short this time. Again, I'm using the mod wheel, so you'll notice it gets loud and then soft because I'm basically playing around with the mod wheel here. So at the very bottom, it's very quiet. And then trombones A12. All right, here we go. Cover your ears. Let's turn up the legato volume a little bit. So now let's take a look at the bass trombones, and what the lowest note is C0. Super low. So in terms of application, I typically tend to use bass trombones as kind of a bass supporting role, but it really depends on the actual context. So if we're talking about more of a chorale type of thing, bass trombones also have a really nice warm tone, so they can easily be just as used practically for a harmony tone. You know, when you're layering in your brass underneath for a nice chorale, there's different options. Like especially horns are the most used, I think, widely for kind of like pads and just warm stuff. So the trombones can also play in that role, and the bass trombones can really either reinforce the root notes at the bottom, or they can even provide that lower harmony tone. Just keep in mind the overtone series. You don't want to layer in too much stuff at the bottom, or else they'll start to clog up very easily. All right, almost at the end here. So now we have chimbassi. Again, a less commonly used instrument in the traditional symphonic orchestra, but for film scoring, very practical. Yeah, just really biting there. Let's hear a couple of rips, actually. Okay, and finally we have the tuba. So for the tuba, I actually pulled in a combination of the close and the tree mic. So if you take a look here, we have both of them on, and I've kind of lowered the volume so it doesn't blast at our ears, but just listen to the tone of this tuba here. So. Okay, let's bring it up to the top of the module here. So noticeably, it's a lot less brassier than the other instruments, and this is kind of how the tuba is built. It's a very warm and mellow sound, so you really don't need to try to force a brassy sound out of the tuba. The tuba's role is really to lend that fundamental sound at the very bottom. Usually, you know, that could be the root notes, that could just be the bass notes that are playing at the moment, but a very, very beautiful sound. Staccatissimo. Nice and fat and warm, just as you would expect from a beautiful tuba. And there we go. I would say the overall tone of the instrument is very, very consistent. The way Alan Meyerstein and Junkie XL mixed these instruments, they really brought it forward in the mix. They introduced those beautiful like tones. What's a good way to describe it? It's very upfront and it's very clean and clear. Not to say that the original recordings weren't either, but it just feels like there's an extra added polish on the top, which is always very nice. So now, before we close off, let me just play for you this Olympic fanfare excerpt for each of these instruments, and you can actually take a look while I'm doing this with the articulations playing. So we'll start with the solo trumpet here. Here we go. So a lot of key switches used there. Trumpets A6. And again, for that big swell, just use the sustains. Solo horn, and now horns A12. before we carry on here, you'll notice how in the horns A12, I actually included this forzano sustain near the end. See if I can open up the MIDI here and show you. Dun, 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 dun. I think this F over here. See, that's a forzano sustain right there on the F. Dun, dun, dun. Because I really like the natural attack that gave me. Whereas for it was either the solo horn. Yeah, the solo horn, I didn't feel the need to switch this forzano attack because I was okay with the way the sustain itself, the attack of the regular sustain. So you'll just have to customize your key switches or your articulation set in Logic to the benefit of the line itself. So don't necessarily copy and paste your MIDI data. I actually played in each single one here, and then I made sure to apply each key switch individually. So it takes a little more time, but you get a more accurate result at the end. So just try to serve the line as best as possible. Solo trombone, how are we here? Right there. Okay, here we go. Mod wheel at the very end there. You can hear how biting that sticcatissimo really is. It really keeps up. The tuba. And there it is. So hopefully you enjoyed this kind of little demonstration there at the very end, but I think the Olympic fanfare theme is a very good test for the fast lines and the capabilities of the staccatissimo, just as a little test. And naturally you would assume that, the more instruments that there are, the larger the ensemble size, the less it's going to be able to keep up, just because of the reflections of the room and they build on top of each other and all that. But once you create your custom mic mixes, and when it's in the context of a fuller mix, it doesn't sound unnatural at all. Personally, I think it sounds very, very good and very, very solid. So if you're in the market for a brass library that's very comprehensive, gives you all the basic orchestral sections that you need, plus the cimbassi for some extra body in the low end, this is a very, very good option. Also, the option to buy a la carte now, where you can buy the instruments individually and it comes with the articulations and mic positions that you want. That makes it very easy to save on disk space. So that's definitely something to look out for if you're just in the market for some trombones, for example. Those are very well regarded in this library. So if you want a solo trombone, then you can literally just download the solo trombone with the mic positions you want, and it'll be a very, very good addition to whatever brass libraries you may own right now. So for me, the biggest pluses of this library are, first of all, its dynamic range. It's huge, right? So you get the recorded pianissimos all the way to the triple forte, fortissimo, I think it's called. But yeah, and also the ability to turn off whichever dynamic layers you want is super helpful. So for something that's a little more slow and a little more solemn, you can deactivate those upper dynamic layers to really, make your line controlled and not have to accidentally hit those upper dynamics, which is nice. You see, you also have the option to go to niente. So that means when you go to the very bottom of your mod wheel, the sound just dies out completely. So very nice if you want the instruments to end there. Legato is solid. It's nice to have this, dynamic, for the legato transitions to turn them up or down. It can feel a little bit sluggish at times, but it's nice to have the playable runs option to kind of, switch to a quicker legato transition. But the best kind of medium I find is that if I'm playing a slow line and the legato is bumping up just a little bit, then I turn it down. And same for the faster lines. If the legato is a little bit sluggish at times, I can always switch to playable runs and then turn down the volume a little bit just to get them to flow a little bit better. Yeah, and in terms of articulations, I really like the set they come with. I think a couple more articulations would have been even cooler, like maybe growls. That would be a really cool update. Some sort of doits and maybe falls. Those are used more in jazz, but you know, like Glory Days has those, so that's another a la carte option in the future. But if Junkie XL Brass had it, that would be awesome. Like some extra effects to add to your film scores, I think that would be awesome. But aside from that, I really like the playability and the use of this library. Very, very beautiful sound again, you know, recorded at the Celtic scoring stage. And really, I think 2 mic positions is all you really need. 1 close and 1 farther mic position. I personally like close and tree because one provides you with a lot of detail while the other gives you a nice ambience of the hall plus a little bit of detail from above the conductor's head. So that provides a really nice balance to my ears. And then again, if you wanted to merge the mic positions together, then you create a custom mic position that is the combination of those mic positions, and it takes up the footprint of just 1 mic position. So you save on CPU that way as well. So in any case, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it, and it was a lot of fun for me to kind of go through the library and play with the articulations. It's very, very consistent in my opinion. So thanks again. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you in the next video. Have a wonderful day and take care. Bye-bye.